I wanted to make a video discussing territorial expansions that I think should happen under Donald Trump that are, or at the very least, semi-realistic. Number one, it is the most obvious. It is the purchase of Greenland from Denmark. This would be part of a wider territorial expansion within the Arctic known as the Polar Nexus. Now, there's a lot to discuss when it comes to potentially purchasing Greenland, the first being Denmark's willingness to sell it. I think Trump could leverage the idea of the U.S. leaving NATO, which could cause many European countries to help the United States pressure Denmark into selling Greenland to the U.S., along with the fact that Greenland would be much better used if it were in American hands. It's estimated Greenland has upwards of $5 trillion worth of natural resources. However, extracting those natural resources is something that Denmark is incapable of doing. The United States, however, is not. The initial offer would be $15 billion cash up front, $5 billion long-term investment, preferential trade terms for Danish industries, particularly for exports to the U.S., benefiting Denmark's economy. Greenland would retain significant autonomy, similar to Puerto Rico or U.S. states, ensuing preservation of its local government language and culture. Greenland has a plentiful amount of rare earth metals, critical for technology like smartphones, electric vehicles, and wind turbines. The revenue over a 30-year time period extracting resources from Greenland would go something like this. The United States would be able to extract around $1.4 trillion worth of oil and gas, around $500 billion worth of rare earth metals, and around $300 billion of other materials. The total cost over 3 decades would look something like this. The purchase price around $30 billion, developmental costs would be $150 billion, operating costs would also be $150 billion. The total net investment would be around $330 billion, and over a 30-year time period, the extracted resources would be worth a total of around $2.27 trillion for a net overall profit within a 30-year window of $1.9 trillion. The second place of territorial expansion comes at the southern border. Trump should annex the area directly to the south of the border, lowering it, allowing for a 5-mile wide buffer zone. The original wall that Trump built during his first term would be finished with money Trump saves from ending the Russia-Ukraine war. And then the United States would then build a second wall, even taller, at the new border that would be even further south. It would cost around $40 billion. The U.S. could threaten Mexico with a trade war or a military exercise to enable the annexation of the land and redraw the border. The new border would include a buffer zone to seal it completely. Baja California would also be annexed in the scenario as a territory. Under a written agreement, it could not be added to California for at least 30 years. The U.S. could just straight up purchase Mexico, deeming the cartel situation a threat to national security and making Mexico a puppet state, but that would require massive upfront investment. The third territorial expansion would be the annexation of the 3 most northern Canadian provinces: Yukon, Northern Territories, and Nunavut. The total cost would be around $40 billion. The value of the land and its resources, buying them would give the United States clear control of the Arctic in an event the climate changes. The U.S. would likely make around $500 billion off of the natural resources within a 30-year time span. The purchase of those areas in Canada is also not overly complicated considering they are sparsely populated. Canada most certainly would not want to give them up, but the United States has enormous leverage over them in terms of military might and the trade reliance that the Canadians have on America. The western part of British Columbia would also be annexed to create a path to the upper northern territories in Alaska without the need to enter Canada. Acquiring southern provinces within Canada would be extremely difficult because of the population. Saskatchewan or Alberta, the more Republican provinces, would be most suitable for annexation. Both of these provinces would be added as states, as it would be more favorable for Republicans in elections. The fourth area of territorial expansion for the United States could come via the purchase of territory in Antarctica. It is effectively currently illegal for any country or individual to buy land in Antarctica due to the Antarctic Treaty System. The Antarctic Treaty, which was signed in 1959 and entered into force in 1961, establishes Antarctica as a scientific preserve However, the United States could use a special military exemption to purchase land for natural resource mining. The U.S. could start by carving out an area, claiming it, and allowing countries to get acclimated to the idea of the United States owning Antarctica, and then they could fully take over the entire continent, allowing other countries to have research bases, but also enabling the United States to hoard the resources within Antarctica. Rich in natural resources, though many of these remain largely untapped due to these strict regulations, the continent boasts an estimated $10 trillion worth of natural resources. This will inevitably anger adversaries like Russia and China, and they might try and claim land in Antarctica, but we would trust the United States' industrial technological might to extract the most resources efficiently in harsh conditions. The fifth territorial expansion would be the purchase of the island of Bermuda from the United Kingdom. Bermuda is located in the Atlantic Ocean, making it a valuable strategical military and naval asset. Bermuda already has close ties to the United States culturally, economically, and politically. Many Bermudians frequently travel to the U.S., and U.S. companies already have a strong presence there. This could make integration smoother compared to other territories. Bermuda would cost around $50 billion. Now, other potential purchases could include Iceland and Australia, although those would be much more difficult to execute considering the population of those countries. Trump should also look at granting Puerto Rico full independence from the United States. Many Puerto Ricans want to be independent and don't like mainland Americans. The relationship, even though it does benefit both sides, needs to be looked at. The U.S. does gain a strategic advantage in that area, but they also give an insane amount of foreign aid to Puerto Rico. Trump should also implement a NATO tax if he decides to stay in the agreement, requiring NATO countries to pay around 0.2% of their GDP to the United States directly for the United States to remain a member of NATO. Otherwise, the United States could threaten to leave NATO and create a super alliance with Russia and China.